What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to the channel.
Yo.
So big things happening in the world of Jake Paul boxing. Yeah. We have Tommy Fury out with what he said is a severe chest infection and a broken rib. Now we have Tyron Woodley in for the rematch, a tattooed up Tyron Woodley. He's going to step back in there and try to take Jake Paul out. And Jake Paul was so upset about the fact that people were accusing him of having a clause in his contract which precluded any of his previous opponents from knocking him out, that he actually said, I'm going to incentivize T. Wood extra $500,000 if he puts me on the canvas and I can't get back up.
Man, that's pretty cool. And, you know, for me, I'm sad to see the Fury fight go, but at the same time, I'm actually really excited to see the rematch. I did think after that first fight that there was a lot left on the table by both men, to be completely honest, but more so Tyron Woodley. And I wanted to see them go at it again. And I felt like because Jake in the ring said that if you get the tattoo of I love Jake Paul, I will fight you again. I took that as he'll give you the immediate rematch. And Jake seems to be a man of his word. This is clearly showing that it's signs of that. He's showing he's a legit tough guy, not by just getting in there and fighting, but now taking all comers, taking on people on short notice, people that he's already beaten that probably, you know, will be a tougher fight than the Tommy Fury fight. So I really like it. Kudos to Jake Paul. Sucks for Tommy Fury. This could be the biggest payday of his career, and it's gone from him. And who knows if he'll get it back. You know, Jake Paul will probably make it very, very difficult, and he'll make him literally get on his knees and beg to get this fight again. T. Wood's in a great spot, though, because he did tell us all that he had the opportunity to knock him out and chose not to a few times. And if he got one more round or even just one more minute with Jake Paul, he would have finished the fight. So let's see if T. Wood's able to do it.
Yeah, I'm actually very excited for Tyron. I think that he actually squares up against Jake better than Tommy Fury does. Tommy Fury, we know what we're going to get out of him. He's a boxer who's still developing. He's going to do things within the traditional framework of boxing. He's a much taller, much younger opponent than Woodley. But Woodley is going to come out with very unconventional looks and styles and ranges that are going to make things a little bit more difficult for Jake Paul. We saw Jake get hit with some pretty big shots in the last fight. But if I'm fair, Jake handled him well, and he came through it and was able to get the decision victory. So I'm very excited. Was very happy that T. Wood's getting the rematch. And as you said, there's few fighters out there where a fight against them is like almost capturing lightning in a bottle. Yeah. Conor McGregor is one of them. And like it or not, Jake Paul is also one of them, where if you have your opportunity and you seize it, you have a great payday. And then if you win, it's off to the stratosphere from there. But if for some reason that fight falls through, just look at Rafael dos Anjos as an example for Conor McGregor. That fight was all but done, and then that fight will probably never happen now. So who knows if Jake Paul goes out there and he gets a finish over T. Wood or has another spectacular decision win, if he doesn't move on to something completely different and Tommy's left holding the bag. Now, Jake has come out and said fighters fight through injuries all the time. I don't know the severity of Tommy Fury's chest infection. I know that Tyson Fury is a very tough guy, and I don't think that Tyson in Tommy's corner would be advising him to pull out of this fight unless it was absolutely necessary. So I'll just take Tommy at his word that he is actually injured and is actually too sick to compete. But man, when something like this passes you by, sometimes that bus doesn't come back around to pick you up ever again.
Yeah, and it's really going to be tough for him to get back to this spot. You know, the cough and the sickness is one thing. Anybody would fight through that. But when you have something broken in your system, a broken rib, that can actually be pretty dangerous to fight with, and it can only lead to injuries. You know, Jake Paul would probably find out about it before the fight, so he would aim for it. That's what fighters do. You're supposed to go after the weaknesses that you are aware of. And if somebody would have leaked the information that Tommy Fury had a broken rib, they would have figured out what side it was on, and they would have started attacking it. And I think Tommy Fury is unfortunately in that mindset, and my sort of boxing has led him to believe that he has to protect that undefeated record. You're in the biggest fight in the sport. There's no bigger fight right now than boxing Jake Paul. Well, you know, win, lose, or draw, if you put on a good performance, your stock's going to go up. But he'd rather protect his O, and I feel like that's a big miss in this situation. You get into prize fighting for the biggest prize. Jake Paul can offer you the biggest prizes. So even though you're only 6 or 7 fights into your career, if you're getting the biggest prizes possible, well, then you've already arrived, and you don't have to continue. You don't have to be 20-0 to get to those big fights. You're there. You're already there. So I feel like he should have, if it wasn't a broken rib, fight through that sickness and go and get this big payday, and then hopefully try to get a rematch or a trilogy with Jake Paul, because that is absolutely, as much as people hate to believe it, the money fight over in boxing.
Yeah, it was certainly the money fight for anybody that's not already a current world title holder or something. A Canelo fight maybe gets you a bigger payday than a Jake Paul fight, but in order to fight somebody of Canelo's magnitude, you've got to be holding one or multiple world titles to even get him to start saying your name. Right. So as far with regards to people that have less than 20 wins and don't hold a world title, Jake Paul is the guy. Love it or hate it, facts are facts, and that just happens to be a reality. So I really love Jake Paul's professionalism here. You're going to have to follow me a little bit, because a lot of people will hear that and say, what do you mean Jake Paul's professionalism? But look, Jake Paul said, I have a responsibility to the fans who have purchased tickets and the people that are planning on traveling to be here to see me fight. I have a responsibility to the fighters on the undercard, Amanda Serrano and all the other people that are going to have good paydays, and I'm going to make sure they're taken care of. If I back out, everybody loses their payday, and the fans lose their money, or probably get refunded, but they end up not being able to see me fight before the end of the year. Right. So I'm going to be the professional and step in on short notice against an opponent, albeit somebody I'm already familiar with, but not somebody that I was preparing for. And I do think we have to start throwing the word professionalism around when we talk about Jake Paul. He said, I show up, I'm going to perform on the nights I'm supposed to perform. I'm going to make sure my undercard is taken care of. And you can hate the kid all you want, and I get why. I mean, he's a polarizing figure, and he says things purposefully to antagonize people. But actions do speak louder than words, and I'm impressed with his actions here.
Yeah, he's doing the right thing, and obviously he understands very, very well the entertainment aspect of boxing and sports. And he loves to get under the skin. You look at Floyd Mayweather. He was one of those guys that, love him or hate him, you tuned in to watch him fight. And it was, maybe you wanted to see him lose, but you still paid the same amount of money. And that trickled down all the way through boxing. So he understood that, he needed to show up. And even if he had to say some things that ruffled some feathers, it was for the greater good, both for his bank account and everybody following under him on the fight, their bank account. So I really like that Jake's doing it. I think that nobody would have batted an eye if Jake Paul backed down from this. They would have continued to talk trash, like they're going to continue to talk trash about Jake Paul. But the fact that he did this speaks volumes about how he takes this boxing that he's doing. I'm calling it professional boxing. It is no longer celebrity boxing. He's fighting a tough guy. Tyron Woodley now has 8 rounds of boxing under his belt against Jake Paul. He knows what he felt. I think Tyron Woodley is going to be a much more dangerous opponent than Tyron Woodley in the first fight. And I honestly think Jake Paul's going to be a more dangerous fighter for Tyron Woodley. So this one, to me, feels like there could very well be a finish in this fight.
Yeah, look for Tyron Woodley to look for the finish early and often.
Not just for the money, too.
No, not for the money. And the funny thing about that, and that's one, before we actually make our official predictions, I wanted to touch on that, because there was a lot of discussion about this no knockout clause in the contract. Yeah. And to me, it never made sense to begin with. You can put anything you want in a contract if it's an exhibition or if it's something that doesn't have real ramifications to it. But when a state's athletic commission is sanctioning a fight, they have their own set of rules and criteria that you can't go beyond. Now, I know that there's been fight fixing in the past and people have been paid off to lose fights and all that, but all of that falls outside of the realm of what's legal.
Right.
And if you do that, you run the risk of being barred for life or a certain period of time. So I don't believe that there truly was a no knockout clause in the contract because it was a professional fight. If it was an exhibition, I'm with you. I could see that happening. But given the fact that this was a real sanctioned professional fight, I think that it took place as just that, a real sanctioned professional fight. And I think that Jake's proving a point here saying, hey, look, you thought I had a no knockout clause before. How about we incentivize Tyron Woodley with an extra $500,000 if he can knock me out?
Yeah.
Now, also I'm aware of the fact that what's in a contract supersedes what's said in the public. And me and you can agree to something contractually, and I can go to the public and say something completely different. So it may all be, sort of posturing, smoke and mirrors and talking. But all the same, I believe that given the fact that this is a real pro fight, that we're going to have a real pro fight, and the outcome will be just that of a real pro fight. I think Tyron Woodley is coming to look for the knockout early and often. He knows he's not fighting Jake Paul again, and he's likely probably not winning a decision against Jake Paul.
Yeah.
So he's going to be coming for his revenge from the first bell of the opening round, and I think he might hurt Jake Paul, and he may even put him down a couple of times. Man, I'm so torn even sitting here trying to make this prediction. I'm going to go Tyron Woodley, technical knockout in the 6th round.
Yeah, that's a good call. And, I'm kind of leaning towards Tyron, even though we just saw the fight. And while Jake Paul is likely since he is the A side, is likely to get his hand raised if it goes to the judges, he got his hand raised last time because he outboxed Tyron for the majority of the rounds. Tyron for sure landed the bigger punches. But if you go back and look at like Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder Part 1, there was a couple of rounds that were clear as day 10-8 for Deontay Wilder. But everything else was, Tyson Fury just beating him up.
Yeah.
And you have to count boxing the way it is scored. It is scored round by round. And then you tally up at the end of the fight who had more rounds won and by how many points.
Yep.
And I think Jake Paul might have edged out. I think he won at least 4 rounds in that first one. So I think you're right. Tyron Woodley's going to go in there and try to take his head off. And I think Jake Paul's going to try to do the same, which is going to lead to a very exciting first few rounds. And if somebody's not knocked out by then, it's going to look very similar to the first fight. But if Tyron Woodley's able to pressure Jake Paul enough and really put the pace on him, by the time the 4th and 5th and 6th round roll around, he's not going to have the gas to stick around there like Tyron Woodley, I believe, will, because he has so much experience and he's just kind of got that, lifelong athlete type of gas tank, where Jake Paul, he's got crazy power and he is able to box for a while. But if you gas him out, he showed us in the last fight that he doesn't really like to be in there, and he does look for ways out, even if that means trying to get the knockout or potentially get knocked out.
Yeah, and like we just saw with Teofimo Lopez and George Kambosos Jr., sometimes when you go looking for the knockout, you lose. Almost all the time you go looking for the knockout and don't get it, you lose the decision. So that is the one caveat here. Yeah. I do believe Tyron will lose a decision because I think he's going to be looking for the knockout. It's just a matter of can he get it. But the more he can engage Jake in a wild fight, the more it favors Tyron. Yep. If Jake can stay long and jab and box and do the things he's working on down in Puerto Rico within the framework of the sweet science, it favors Jake. The more that Tyron Woodley can turn this into a fight inside of a boxing ring, the better it favors him. And I think he's going to be able to do it because Tyron's pushing 40 years old. Mm-hmm. He's out of the UFC. Bellator just showed us with Kevin Lee passing on him that they're not really into signing old UFC veterans. Tyron's only got a few things he can do in fighting to make money, and this is it. So I think he's going to be looking to seize the opportunity because 2 losses against Jake Paul at 40 years old, I don't know where he goes from there.
Yeah, maybe triad for a couple of fights, or who knows where he goes. But I do think you're right. I think Jake Paul, he's hit him a couple of times with some pretty hard shots, probably the hardest he can throw. And Tyron Woodley took him. The reason Tyron was gun shy and a little bit, stalling, a little bit slow in the first fight was because he didn't want to be the guy that got knocked out by Jake Paul. Now I think he knows just how powerful Jake Paul is. I think he knows Jake can knock him out, but he knows how to get away from that. He's going to push the pressure. This is going to be a more exciting fight than the first one, and I can't wait to see it happen. Final prediction. An ugly decision, and they're going to have Jake Paul get his hand raised. But I do kind of see where you're coming from, where T Wood might get his hand raised.
Nice. Well, guys, settle the score for us. Nick thinks that Jake Paul is going to win another tough decision. I think Woodley's coming for the kill, and this time he just might get it. So let us know what you think in the comments. If you haven't smashed that like button already, please do so now. It helps us tremendously with the algorithm. And if you enjoyed the content, a subscribe to the channel is always appreciated. Until the next one, have a wonderful day.
Peace.